I'm Jake Thompson, a young lawyer working at Silicon Innovations, one of the largest technology companies in the world. Since I started my career here, I have always looked up to my boss, Michael Harris. He is charismatic, respected, and appears to be an untouchable figure in the business world. However, recently, I started to notice some inconsistencies in the company's financial reports. It was during a routine review that my curiosity was really piqued. It was a typical afternoon at the office. I was reviewing the quarterly financial reports when something caught my eye. A bank transfer seemed out of the ordinary. The amount was significantly high, and the recipient, an offshore account, did not make sense in the context of the company's operations. I decided to investigate further. Days passed and I couldn't get that suspicion out of my head. Each time I reviewed the documents, more inconsistencies appeared. It was as if a puzzle was beginning to form before my eyes, but crucial pieces were missing. One afternoon, I decided to talk to my trusted colleague, Tom. He was an experienced accountant and could help me better understand what was going on. "Tom, do you have a minute?" I asked, entering his room. "Of course, Jake. What are you catching?" he replied, looking up from his papers. "I've noticed some strange things in the financial reports. Transfers to offshore accounts that I can't explain. Could you take a look at this?" Tom took the documents and began to analyze them carefully. After a few minutes, he raised his head, with a serious expression. "Jake, this really doesn't seem right. It could be something big." My mind was racing. If Tom, with all his experience, also found that suspicious, there was something very wrong going on. I decided I needed to investigate further, but without raising suspicion. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in financial reports and records like never before. Increasingly, the evidence pointed to a money embezzlement scheme. And, to my surprise and disappointment, all roads led to Michael Harris. "It can't be," I muttered to myself, on a lonely night at the office. But the evidence was there. Harris was diverting large sums of money from Silicon Innovations to offshore accounts. The network of corruption was much deeper than I could have imagined. One day, while reviewing more documents, I was approached by Sarah, one of the company's most experienced accountants. She looked worried. "Jake, can I talk to you?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Of course, Sarah." "What there was?" I asked, trying to hide my own anxiety. "I also noticed some strange things in the financial reports. And I think you've noticed it too, right?" I was surprised by Sarah's direct approach, but at the same time relieved that I wasn't alone in this. "Yes, Sarah. I have been investigating this. And things don't look good." Sarah nodded, and together we began sharing the information we had. From that moment on, we worked together in secret, trying to disconnect the dots without arousing suspicion. Each clandestine meeting, each exchange of information after hours, increased our understanding of the magnitude of the corruption scheme. Each day, the image of Michael Harris as a respectable leader disintegrated further in my mind. "Jake, we need more concrete proof. This is much bigger than we imagined," said Sarah, in one of our secret meetings. "I know, Sarah. We need to be careful. We can't risk them finding out what we're doing," I replied. The investigation was just beginning, and I could already feel the weight of the consequences that would come. But one thing was certain, I could not let this corruption continue. Justice needed to prevail, and I was determined to do whatever was necessary to expose the truth. Deciding to investigate on my own, I started gathering more data and soon realized that the financial irregularities were linked to several offshore accounts. It was an arduous and painstaking task, but each new discovery made me feel like I was getting closer to the truth. It was like putting together a puzzle, and each piece revealed a little more of the dark picture behind Silicon Innovations' finances. During one of these long nights of investigation, something unexpected happened. I was in the conference room, surrounded by stacks of documents, when Sarah entered. She was an experienced accountant known for her accuracy and impeccable ethics. Her face was serious, and she looked hesitant but determined. "Jake, I need to talk to you, she began, closing the door behind her and slowly approaching. Of course, Sarah. What happened? I asked, trying to hide my nervousness. I've also noticed some strange things in the financial reports, she said, lowering her voice. And I believe you noticed too, didn't you? My surprise was evident. Yes, I noticed. But how do you know? She sighed. I've seen you reviewing the documents several times. And to be honest, I've also been suspicious of the company's financial activities for some time now. That was a unique opportunity. If Sarah was also suspicious, then I was not alone in this investigation. Sarah, I need your help, I confessed. I believe Michael Harris is embezzling large sums of money. But I need more evidence to confirm this. She nodded, looking relieved to finally have someone to share her worries with. Let's work together, then. We can start by reviewing the most suspicious transactions and comparing them to the original documents. And so began our secret partnership. We spend hours and hours reviewing documents, cross-referencing data and analyzing transactions. Each new file we found seemed to further the corruption plot. Jake, look at this, Sarah said one night, pointing at the computer screen. These transactions here, they all lead to offshore accounts. And the amounts are absurdly high. I looked at the numbers and felt a chill down my spine. This is much bigger than I imagined. We're talking millions of dollars. Sarah nodded, her face showing the same apprehension I felt. We need to be careful. If Harris finds out we're investigating, it could be dangerous. You're right, I replied. But we can't give up now. We're closer to the truth than ever. Our meetings became more frequent, always in discreet locations and after hours to avoid arousing suspicion. It was a dangerous game, but we were determined to expose the truth. Jake, do you think we can trust anyone else? Sarah asked one evening as we were reviewing yet another stack of documents. I don't know, Sarah. The fewer people who know, the better. We need to be cautious, I replied, feeling the weight of responsibility growing every day. As time passed, our investigation revealed that the sums embezzled were much larger than initially imagined. The offshore accounts were full of suspicious transactions, and each new discovery led us deeper into the web of corruption. Sarah, this is so much bigger than just Harris, I said, after a particularly shocking discovery. I think he has accomplices. And not just in the company, but outside of it as well. She nodded, her face reflecting the gravity of the situation. We need more hard evidence. And above all, we need to be extremely careful. Our determination only grew, but we also knew we were entering dangerous territory. The network of corruption was vast and complex, and any misstep could be disastrous. But we were committed to truth and justice, and nothing would make us give up on that mission. When I realized we needed more hard evidence to expose Michael Harris, Sarah and I decided it was time to intensify our investigation. The feeling that we were dealing with something much bigger than we imagined was almost palpable. We needed to act with extreme caution, as any false step could put us in danger. Jake, we need to be discreet. We can't raise suspicions, Sarah said, as we reviewed some documents in a coffee shop away from the city center. I know, Sarah. But how are we going to get concrete evidence without anyone noticing? I asked, already feeling the weight of responsibility. We need direct access to the company's financial systems. If we can achieve this, we can track the transfers and find the final destination of the money, she suggested. It was then that we began to hold our clandestine meetings. We met after hours, in places where no one would recognize us. Each encounter was a new piece of the puzzle, and Sarah, with her accounting background, was instrumental in understanding the complexity of the financial transactions we uncovered. I have an idea, Jake, Sarah told me during one of these meetings. We can simulate a failure in the financial system and use that as an excuse to carry out an internal audit. This way, we will have access to the data we need without raising suspicion. Brilliant, Sarah. But we need to act quickly. Harris is cunning and can spot any irregularities, I replied, excited by the possibility. While we worked on this strategy, I also had to deal with my relationship with Emily. She was an exceptional investigative journalist, so she knew that any change in my behavior could pique her curiosity. "Jake, you've been so distant lately. Is everything okay at work?" she asked one night while we were having dinner at home. "It's okay, love. I'm just a little overwhelmed with some new projects," I lied, trying to sound convincing. Emily looked at me with those piercing eyes, as if she knew I was hiding something. "If you need help or want to talk, you know you can count on me, right?" she said, holding my hand. "I know, Emily." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a pang of guilt that I couldn't share everything with her. With Sarah's plan in action, we were able to access the company's financial data. We started finding transfers to offshore accounts and identifying the beneficiaries. Each new discovery increased our determination, but also our fear. "Jake, this is bigger than we imagined. There are a lot of people involved. If we get caught, they could silence us forever," Sarah said, visibly worried. "We can't give up now, Sarah. We're so close to the truth. We need to keep going, but even more carefully," I replied, trying to calm her and myself. Our meetings became even more secret. We used codes to communicate and exchanged information on encrypted devices. All this clandestinity was affecting my personal life, but I knew it was necessary. "Jake, you're working too much. You need some rest," Emily insisted, noticing my tiredness. "I know, Emily. I promise I'll take some time for us soon," I lied again, knowing the truth was far from out. The pressure was increasing, and the feeling of always being watched was constant. But every step we took brought us closer to the truth. The mission to expose Michael Harris and his network of corruption had become a matter of honor for Sarah and me. We were determined to see this investigation through to the end, no matter the risks. And deep down, I knew that eventually I would have to tell Emily everything. But for now, our safety and the pursuit of justice were my absolute priority. I always knew that being a lawyer at a cutting-edge technology company like Silicon Innovations wouldn't be easy. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. Since I started noticing inconsistencies in financial reports, my life has been turned upside down. I was increasingly focused on the investigation, which inevitably began to affect my relationship with Emily. Emily is a brilliant investigative journalist, and her nose for juicy stories is unparalleled. But I needed to keep my involvement in the investigation secret, both to protect her and to ensure that I didn't put all of our work at risk. However, the change in my behavior did not go unnoticed by her. "Man, you've been weird lately, Jake. What's going on?" Emily asked one night while we were having dinner. I knew I couldn't lie to her, but I also couldn't tell her the whole truth. "It's just work, Em. You know, lots of deadlines, lots of stress. Nothing you need to worry about," I replied, trying to sound convincing. But she knew me too well. "Jake, I'm not stupid. I know there's something more going on. And I'm going to find out, with or without your help," she said, with that determined look that I admire so much. The days passed, and I continued to work secretly with Sarah, trying to gather more evidence against Michael Harris. But Emily was increasingly suspicious and, like a good journalist, began to investigate on her own. It didn't take long for her to realize that Silicon Innovations was involved in a major financial scandal. Her investigations led her to suspect Harris, as did I. But what she didn't know was that I was already in the middle of it all. One night, after another exhausting day of work, I found Emily sitting in the living room, surrounded by papers and notes. "Jake, I need to show you something," she said, her tone serious. My heart raced. Had she discovered everything? "Sure, Em. What's wrong?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "I've been investigating Silicon Innovations for the last few days. There are a lot of strange things going on. Check this out," she said, showing me a series of financial documents that clearly indicated irregularities. And that led me to suspect Michael Harris. I was speechless for a moment. She was so close to the truth, and I needed to protect her. Emily, you need to stop this. It's dangerous, I said, trying to sound convincing. Dangerous? Jake, we're talking about corruption at one of the biggest technology companies in the world. If I'm right, we need to expose this, she replied, determined. Emily, please trust me. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, I begged, but she just looked at me suspiciously. Jake, why are you so worried? What do you know that I don't know? She insisted. At that moment, I realized I couldn't keep her in the dark any longer. Emily, I'm already looking into this. Sarah and I are working together to gather evidence against Harris. But we need to be extremely careful. There's a lot more at stake than you realize. His eyes widened. Are you looking into this? Jake, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because it's dangerous, Em. I didn't want to put you at risk. But now that you know, we need to be even more careful. Promise you won't get involved any more than necessary, I asked, trying to convince her. She sighed but agreed. It's okay, Jake. But if you need help, I'm here. From that moment on, our relationship changed. Emily was aware of the risks, and although I still wanted to protect her, I knew I couldn't stop her investigative nature. She was determined to get to the bottom of it, as was I. And together, even if in different ways, we were ready to face whatever came our way. Discovering that some members of the board of directors were involved in the corruption scheme was a real shock for Sarah and me. Until then, we believed that these were just embezzlements committed by Harris and perhaps some isolated accomplices. However, as we delved deeper into our investigation, it became clear that the conspiracy network was much vaster and more complex than we imagined. It all started when we found encrypted emails on one of the company's secondary servers. Jake, look at this, Sarah said, pointing to her laptop screen. These emails were exchanged between Harris and some board members. They are discussing transfers of large sums to offshore accounts. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This is a lot bigger than we thought, Sarah. If board members are involved, it means Harris has more internal support than we realized. Exactly, Sarah agreed. We need to be even more careful from now on. If they see we're investigating, we're toast. The pressure began to increase exponentially. Not only were we trying to keep everything secret, we also started receiving veiled threats. One day, when I arrived at my apartment, I found an anonymous letter pushed under the door. Give up while you can, or the consequences will be severe, the message said. I showed Sarah the letter the next morning. I think they're trying to intimidate us, I commented, feeling a chill run down my spine. Sarah looked at me seriously. Jake, this is becoming dangerous. We need to be extremely cautious from now on. I agree, I replied, trying not to show the fear I felt. But we can't stop now. We are very close to obtaining concrete evidence. As we continued the investigation, we found more documents that directly linked Harris and other board members to fraudulent transactions. One night, while we were going through the files in my apartment, Sarah mentioned something that made me even more uneasy. Jake, I was thinking. What if these threats are just the beginning? What if they try something more radical to stop us? She looked at me with genuine concern in her eyes. I thought about that too, I admitted. But we have to continue. If we give up now, they will win and corruption will continue with impunity. Our clandestine meetings became more frequent and intense. With each new discovery, the corruption network seemed to grow, involving more people and more money. Sarah and I began to feel like two soldiers in a silent war, surrounded by invisible enemies. One night, while we were taking a coffee break, Sarah asked me, Jake, have you thought about what you'll do if we manage to expose this whole scheme? How your life will change? To be honest, Sarah, I don't know, I replied after a moment's thought. But I know I can't continue working in a company where corruption is so deep. What about you? I don't know either, she admitted. But I'm willing to follow through to the end, whatever the cost. The pressure increased every day, especially as we began to notice that Harris was becoming more cautious. It was as if he felt something was wrong, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The threats continued, but were now more direct, suggesting they knew exactly who was behind the investigation. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I noticed a black car parked across the street. Two shadowy figures watched me from inside the vehicle. I picked up my pace, trying to stay calm, but I knew I was being followed. I called Sarah as soon as I got home. "Sarah, I think we're being watched. We need to be extra cautious." "I understand, Jake. We will continue to exchange information only in person and in safe places. We can't let them catch us." Despite all the fear and tension, we were determined to move the investigation forward. The corruption network was much larger than we expected, but this only increased our determination to expose the truth. We were aware of the risks, but we knew that justice needed to prevail. The night was cold and silent when I received the call that would change my life forever. "Jake, we need to talk." "It's urgent." The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Sarah was clearly distraught. I ran to meet her at the cafe where we used to secretly meet. Upon arrival, she handed me an envelope with a look of despair. "Emily was kidnapped," Sarah said in a shaky voice. My heart stopped for a moment. Emily, my partner, my confidant, and the woman I loved, was in danger because of the investigation we were conducting against Michael Harris. "We have to do something, Sarah. We can't let them hurt Emily," I said, trying to stay calm, but feeling adrenaline pumping through my veins. "I know, Jake. We need to think of a plan quickly. Harris is one step ahead of us, and now he knows we're close to unmasking him," replied Sarah, visibly distressed. We spent the next few hours devising a strategy. We knew we couldn't involve the police immediately, as we didn't know who we could trust within the organization. The network of corruption was vast, and any false move could cost Emily her life. "We're going to need help, Jake. Someone who can give us information without raising suspicion," Sarah suggested. I nodded and remembered an old friend, Mark, a former cybersecurity agent who now worked as a private investigator. He had the skills we needed. "I'll call Mark. He can help us track down Emily and provide technical support," he said, picking up the phone. Mark responded quickly, and after explaining the situation, he agreed to meet us in a safe location. "Jake, this is risky, but I'm in. Let's rescue Emily and put an end to these criminals," he said with determination. With Mark on board, we began to plot Emily's location. Using his digital tracking skills, Mark was able to identify a property on the outskirts of town that belonged to one of Harris's shell companies. "She's there, I'm pretty sure," Mark stated, pointing to the laptop screen. "But we need to be quick. We don't know how long they'll keep her alive." Feeling the pressure building, Sarah and I prepared for the operation. "Jake, you're going to need more than courage. Take this," she said, handing me a small gun. I hesitated for a moment, but I knew I had no choice. We drove to the property under cover of night, trying not to attract unwanted attention. When we arrived, Mark deactivated the security cameras and any alarm system that might give us away. "We're in. Good luck, guys," Mark whispered over the radio. We entered quietly, moving through the building cautiously. We could hear voices in the distance, and my heart beat faster with each step. Finally, we came to a locked door, from which came sounds that I immediately recognized as Emily's. "Emily, we're here," I whispered through the door. We could hear her sigh of relief. "Jake, I knew you would come," she replied, her voice weak but full of hope. Sarah quickly picked the lock, and we entered the room, finding Emily tied up and visibly hurt. "We're going to get you out of here," I promised, as we freed her. Just as we were about to leave, we heard heavy footsteps. "They're coming," Sarah warned. With no time to waste, we hid in an adjacent room, trying to think of our next move. Harris's henchmen entered the room where Emily was, surprised to find it empty. "They escaped." "Let's find them," shouted one of them. We took advantage of the confusion to quietly leave the building and return to the car. "Quick, before they find us," Mark said over the radio. We drove back to town in silence, each of us processing what had happened. "We're all in this together, and we're going to take Harris down, no matter what it takes," I declared, looking at Sarah and Emily. They nodded, determined to continue the fight. The risky operation had been a success, but we knew the battle was far from over. With Emily safe, our determination to expose Harris and his network of corruption has only increased. We were ready to face any challenge that came our way, and nothing would make us give up until justice was served. When we managed to rescue Emily, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The danger was not yet completely removed, and the feeling of being dealing with something much bigger than we imagined only increased. Sarah, Emily, and I met at my apartment to discuss next steps. Each of us was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but we knew we couldn't stop now. "Jake, we need to expose Harris as quickly as possible," Sarah said, her voice firm but visibly tired. "I agree," I replied, looking at Emily, who was still trying to recover from the recent trauma. "But we need irrefutable proof. Something no one can question." Emily, despite everything, still had the determined look of an investigative journalist. "We have to get a direct confession from him. Something recorded." I knew she was right. But how do we do that? Harris is no fool. He's not going to just confess to something like that. Sarah started thinking out loud, what if we arrange a meeting with him? Something he can't refuse. A contract or some business deal he's interested in. This might work, I said, feeling a flicker of hope. But how do we guarantee that he will talk about the corruption scheme? We're going to need a strategic approach, Emily continued. Something that makes him feel safe and in control of the situation. He needs to believe he is dealing with allies, not enemies. We spent hours coming up with a plan. We decided that I would meet with Harris under the guise of discussing an important contract related to a new technology the company was developing. Sarah would stay nearby, monitoring everything and ensuring the recording was done successfully. On the day of the meeting, my heart was beating fast. I was nervous, but I knew I needed to stay calm. I met Harris at the reserved restaurant, and he greeted me with that charismatic smile that always made me question how someone so respected could be involved in something so dirty. "Jake, good to see you," Harris said, shaking my hand. "What do you have for me today?" "Michael, I have something I think you'll find very interesting," I began, trying to sound confident. "A new contract that could significantly increase our profits." Harris was immediately interested. As we discussed the details of the fictitious contract, I carefully steered the conversation toward the company's financial issues. I needed him to feel comfortable talking about the deviations without realizing he was being recorded. "Michael, I know we've been making some risky financial moves lately," I said, trying to sound knowing. "But I believe we can maximize our gains if we continue with these strategies." Harris smiled connivingly. "Jake, you're learning fast. Sometimes we need to be creative to keep the company profitable. And these moves are part of that." "I see," I said, trying to contain my excitement. "What about these offshore accounts? They've been quite useful, haven't they?" Harris chuckled softly. "Yes, they are fundamental. We need to keep certain amounts off the authorities' radar. You know how it is." It was enough. Sarah, who was on the other side of the restaurant, managed to capture everything. I felt a mix of relief and adrenaline. We had the confession we needed. "Michael, thanks for clearing everything up," I said, trying to remain calm. "I will work on the next steps of this contract." "Great, Jake." "I trust you," Harris said, suspecting nothing. As I left the restaurant, I ran into Sarah and Emily at a nearby cafe. "We have the recording," Sarah said, holding up the recording device with a triumphant smile. "We did it," Emily whispered, unable to hide her excitement. The feeling of relief was overwhelming, but we knew we still had a long way to go. We needed to get this evidence to the police and the media, ensuring that Harris and everyone involved was exposed and faced justice. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the right track. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the clock and feeling the nervousness growing. It was the day of our meeting with Michael Harris, and Sarah and I were ready to put our plan into action. We had spent weeks planning every detail, but the anxiety was still overwhelming. Sarah entered my office, closing the door quietly behind her. "Everything is ready?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "Yes," I replied, trying to hide my uneasiness. "The cameras are set up, and the meeting room is prepared. We just need him to show up." Sarah nodded and sat in the chair across from me. "Jake, I know this is risky, but it's our best chance to catch Harris. We can't fail." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. "I know, Sarah. We'll make it." Shortly afterwards, Michael Harris entered the meeting room, a confident smile on his face. He greeted us cordially, without suspecting anything. "Jake, Sarah, good to see you. I hope this contract is as promising as I've been told." "Of course, Michael," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have some very interesting proposals to discuss." We sat down at the table and started the meeting. Sarah and I took turns presenting numbers and projections, all carefully prepared to keep Harris interested. At a crucial moment, Sarah paused and looked directly at Harris. "Michael, before we continue, I need to ask you something important," she said, her voice heavy with gravity. "There are rumors about certain financial irregularities at the company. Do you know anything about it?" Harris frowned, clearly taken by surprise. "Financial irregularities? What are you talking about, Sarah?" I chimed in, trying to sound casual. "Yes, Michael. We have received some troubling information. We don't want to accuse anyone, but we think you, as CEO, should be aware." Harris took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Jake, Sarah, I can assure you that any wrongdoing will be investigated. But you should know that in large companies like ours, mistakes sometimes happen." Sarah and I exchanged quick glances. It was our chance. "Michael," I said, "we're not just talking about mistakes. We have evidence of large sums of money being diverted to offshore accounts." Harris visibly tensed. "Evidence? What evidence?" Sarah pulled a small device from her pocket. "We recorded some conversations you had, Michael. Conversations that clearly show your involvement in the scheme." Harris's face paled. "You're bluffing. There's no way you have anything against me." I smiled despite the tension. "Do you want to listen?" And with one click, the recording started playing. Harris's voice was unmistakable, admitting to embezzlement and mentioning other board members. Harris was silent for a moment, eyes fixed on the device. I could see the fury and despair rising in him. "You have no idea what you're doing," he growled. "This will destroy you both." Sarah remained calm. "Michael, the only person who will be destroyed here is you. We have all the proof we need. Let's take this to the police and the media." Harris stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You're going to regret this. I still have enough power to finish you off." I stood up too, facing him. "You can try, Michael. But the truth will prevail. And you will pay for everything you did." With the confession recorded and all the evidence in hand, Sarah and I prepared for the next step. Adrenaline was running through our veins, but we knew the battle was far from over. Now it was a race against time to ensure Harris faced justice. That day, my heart was beating fast. I knew we were about to deal the final blow to Michael Harris and the entire network of corruption he had built within Silicon Innovations. Sarah and I had spent weeks gathering evidence, and we finally had Harris's recorded confession. The plan was simple: hand over the evidence to the authorities and the media, exposing the criminal scheme once and for all. I woke up early, had a quick coffee and met Sarah at our secret meeting point, a small cafe away from prying eyes. "You are ready?" I asked her, trying to hide my anxiety. "More than ever," replied Sarah, with a confident smile. "Let's end this today." As we discussed the final details of the plan, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Emily. "Jake, Harris found out everything. He's trying to flee the country. I'm heading to the airport now. I'll meet you there. Damn it! I exclaimed, feeling a chill run down my spine. Harris found out and is trying to escape. Emily is already on her way to the airport. Sarah's eyes widened. We have to run. We can't let him escape. We grabbed our things and ran to the car. On the way to the airport, I called Emily. Emily, where are you? We need to coordinate this. I'm already at the international terminal, she replied, her voice breathless. Harris is at the airline check-in counter, trying to get a flight out of the country. You guys need to be quick. We are on our way. Keep an eye on him, but don't expose yourself too much, I warned. Upon arriving at the airport, chaos ensued. People rushing to catch their flights, announcements echoing through the speakers and nervousness written all over our faces. We saw Emily near the ticket window, trying to blend in with the crowd. There he is, Emily whispered, discreetly pointing to Harris, who was visibly anxious, speaking to an attendant. We need to act quickly, Sarah said, holding my hand tightly. Let's split up. Jake, you go to the other side of the window and try to slow him down somehow. I'll call the police and make sure they get there on time. I nodded and headed to the other side of the terminal, trying not to attract attention. Harris looked increasingly nervous, looking around as if he knew his time was running out. I needed to do something. Sir. I called, pretending to be an airport employee. I need you to come with me for an additional security check. Harris looked at me suspiciously. What is that? I don't have time for this. Very well, sir, but this is standard procedure and it won't take long, I insisted, trying to stall for time. Meanwhile, Sarah was on the phone with the police, providing all the necessary information. Yes, he is trying to board an international flight. We need reinforcements now. Suddenly, Harris realized something was wrong. He pushed me and started running towards the boarding gate. Damn, he's running away. I shouted, starting to chase him. Emily appeared out of nowhere, blocking Harris's path. You're not going anywhere, Harris, he exclaimed, with determination in his eyes. Harris tried to dodge, but I arrived in time, grabbing his arm. It's over, Harris. We have all the proof. You will not escape justice. It was then that the police arrived, surrounding Harris and handcuffing him. Michael Harris, you are under arrest for embezzlement and corruption. You have the right to remain silent, one of the officers said as Harris was led away. Sarah walked over, a smile of relief on her face. We did it, Jake. He will no longer harm anyone. Emily hugged us. I'm so proud of you. You did the right thing. In court, Harris and his accomplices were convicted, and justice finally prevailed. Sarah and I were praised for our courage and integrity. I received a promotion, and the promise of a bright future opened before me. The feeling of relief and accomplishment was indescribable. We had won. The tension at the airport was palpable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I walked through the terminal, my eyes fixed on Michael Harris, who was just a few feet away, desperately trying to escape. I knew this was the decisive moment. All the work, all the sleepless nights, all the threats and dangers culminated here. Jake, we have to act now, Sarah whispered beside me, the determination in her eyes shining as bright as mine. I know, I replied, taking a deep breath. Let's get this over with. I walked steadily towards Harris, who was arguing with a check-in attendant, trying to get a last-minute flight. He turned when he saw me approaching, his face pale and sweat running down his forehead. Jake! What the hell are you doing here? He exclaimed, trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I think you know very well what I'm doing here, Harris, I replied, my voice firm. We have all the proof we need. You're not going anywhere. Harris looked around like a cornered animal before taking a step towards me. Jake, listen. We can work this out. I can offer you anything. Money, a promotion, whatever you want. I shook my head, feeling a mix of disgust and anger. This isn't about money or promotions, Harris. It's about justice. You betrayed everyone's trust in this company, embezzled millions, and put lives at risk. The time has come to pay for your crimes. Before Harris could respond, we heard the sound of quick footsteps and then an authoritative voice, "Michael Harris, you are under arrest." I turned to see the police arriving, handcuffing Harris while he was still trying to protest. "This is a mistake. You can't do this to me." But it was too late. With Harris detained, I felt a wave of relief course through my body. Sarah placed her hand on my shoulder, a satisfied smile on her face. "We did it, Jake. He's finally going to face justice." In court, the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, the witnesses, everything pointed to the guilt of Harris and his accomplices. The judge had no doubts when handing down the sentence. "Michael Harris, you and your associates are convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The sentence will be served in full." Harris hung his head in defeat. I exchanged a look with Sarah and Emily, who were in the courtroom, sharing a moment of silent triumph. After the trial, the Silicon Innovations conference room was packed. Everyone wanted to congratulate Sarah and I on our courage and determination. The interim CEO took the stage, a wide smile on his face. "Jake Thompson and Sarah Miller, you have shown exceptional integrity and courage. On behalf of the entire Silicon Innovations team, I want to thank and congratulate you. Jake, I am pleased to announce your promotion to Chief Legal Officer." Applause filled the room, and I felt a mixture of pride and humility. Sarah hugged me, and Emily, who now knew the whole truth, smiled with pride on my face. "You did the right thing, Jake. I'm so proud of you." I smiled back, feeling a huge weight lifted from my shoulders. "I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you for being there for me." That night, as I reflected on everything we'd been through, I realized it wasn't just about defeating Harris. It was about protecting the integrity of the company and ensuring justice prevailed. And ultimately, this sense of accomplishment and justice was the greatest reward of all.